Hey everybody, welcome back to Super Cat Studios. It's just me coming at you solo today with a full thoughts on Ironheart. Wrapped up its first season this week and I've had a few days to sit on it and truly process it and, give you my actual full thoughts. Going into this show, I was hoping for more of a character study vibe rather than the usual plot-driven, extended movie approach we're so used to from Marvel TV, and we got a little bit of both. It's definitely a lot more plot-driven than I would have liked, but we do get to explore a lot of Riri's decision-making and the thoughts behind her actions, as well as her kind of mindset throughout the entire narrative. There are a few contentious, perhaps controversial aspects of the show that I'd like to address first, though, just kind of get them out of the way, usual housekeeping. First off, as usual, I'm once again seeing a lot of the negative discourse around diversity mandates, agendas, and whatnot, and I just want to make one thing clear for someone who's watched the show. There is no inserted agenda storytelling present except for the stuff that's intentionally there, addressing a lot of the issues around class and wealth disparity, because that's what, that's a lot of big theme of what the show's about. So of course they're going to address it here. But just to see, people look at the cast and say diversity mandate, like, this isn't a product of a diversity mandate. This is a product of our community and industry expanding and growing and thriving and reaching people it never used to reach before. I don't understand how people can look at that negatively. I just can't. Second off, I understand if somebody comes out of this show not liking Riri. She's brash, she's pretty selfish, and has a very large tendency to spin her own problems to make herself look better, always. But to say she's a poorly written character because she is morally flawed and has many mistakes in this narrative is perhaps the dumbest take I can think of. The story isn't a traditional superhero story. She doesn't have the traditional superhero arc where she overcomes an obstacle. She does not overcome her past trauma, nor her paranoia, nor she does not let go of the grief she holds for her friend and her stepfather, which causes her and culminates into her making the exact same decision the villain makes at the end of the show. She is essentially the villain of her own story, and they made it as blatantly obvious as they could by the end of it. I understand if this type of character progression if it just isn't in someone's wheelhouse. Not every story is going to appeal to everybody. But to say it's poorly written on those terms is just missing the point entirely. Third off, that line, Tony Stark did what he did because he's a billionaire. One, just completely removed from the narrative. I mean, she's kind of right on principle in regards to the systemic parameters that Tony has in his, early life and development. But it doesn't matter to the narrative if she's right. She's actually wrong. And she proves herself wrong in episode 5 when she, actually nuts up and makes the suit herself. This line so early in the show is to paint the picture that she shirks responsibility. She constantly undermines her own efforts because she perceives that things are constantly always against her. That's a flaw in her character. And I feel like it was portrayed really well. I guess a lot of people missed the mark. All right. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the show itself. We're going to go the good, the bad, and the so-so. Let's start out with... First off, if it wasn't evident by how I defended a lot of it, I really do enjoy Riri's story here. The little character study on how traumas can influence how we stretch our morals and how they kind of fuel our goals and desires. Also, how they touch on grief, being almost kind of like stuck. And all you can do is really just kind of lash out and hurt yourself when you don't have the proper support system, when you don't have people holding you accountable around you. The title cards, very, very creative, very fun to kind of like spot them when it's like a second too late, essentially. That was my experience, at least. I was like, oh, look at that. They're doing that. So that was really fun. The Hood was also a really cool villain to be explored in this show. I'm a big I'm a I'm a big fan of how they visualized his powers and the cost of his powers. You know, how the tattoos kind of stood in as a metaphor of the lies he tells himself, that he's not that far deep. He could still cover it up. He could still contain it. It was really cool how they kind of painted that, and then it kind of crumbled out of him by the end and led to addiction, which, again, like Parker's story, yeah, the characterization of Parker, in which how he is completely obsessed with his family's fortune and his birthright and what he is, it almost kind of mirrors Riri's, you know, desire to live up to Gary, her stepfather's legacy. How she views his garage and his workspace as like a delicate, fragile place that, you know, cannot be touched until someone, I think it was Nat, finally pushed her to revisit and try to reopen some of those wounds that didn't heal correctly. I also really like how Parker's crew kind of played into Parker's story, where they were basically kind of feeding a desire for control for him, you know, which also kind of mirrors, you know, how his dad, you know, runs his business, very controlling, very like shut him out type of thing. He kind of runs that crew the same way. He doesn't cue them in on any decisions. He is the final say, even. Oh man, I'm gonna suck for forgetting this character's name, but it's but the guy that Riri lets die, I will re-edit his name in whenever I figure it out. But it's all, yeah, it all just very paints a big picture of who the Hood is and what his kind of goals and intentions are before he just outright says it. Despite that role that they play, I also did find Parker's crew pretty entertaining. I think my favorite out of the bunch had to be Clown, just with that kind of psycho demolitions energy. Just, yeah, no room for subtlety. Just blow up. It was very, very fun. That White Castle fight scene was possibly the best fight scene in the show. It was the best choreographed, the best shot. Its tension and the way it moved around the lobby of the White Castle was great. Just super enjoyable, kind of almost like in your face, out of nowhere type of fight. The visuals in the Stanton's Magic Shop felt really cool and unique. It felt like a more kind of neutral take on magic, where, you know, we're dealing with so much, you know, like evil, bad magic with Mephisto in this show. It was really cool to just kind of see that, as well as the portrayal of Zelma Stanton, a character from the Strange Academy comics. Definitely, honestly, my favorite supporting character out of this show has to be Zelma. Just the way that she kind of apathetically addresses pretty much everything was just very fun. Very fun. I was also a big fan of how Zeke, or Ezekiel Stain's character, kind of progressed through the narrative as well. Not really a villain at the end, but also kind of like working with the villains. You know, I don't see, I guess I don't see Zeke Stain as a villain. I see him just as a guy who was wronged by literally everything around him, and that pushed him down the wrong path. You know, I believe he has a genuine reason to bring harm or kill Riri by the end of the show, but he chooses not to because he doesn't want to become his father. Which also, while we're talking about Zeke, the way they portrayed Obadiah's death in this show was really refreshing to see, to show how the mass population of the MCU isn't really keyed into a lot of, you know, these characters' ends or even their true intentions. Last up in the good, Mephisto. I love how Mephisto was portrayed in this. I was definitely not expecting the way they went, but boy, it blew me away. You know, Sacha Baron Cohen's in here just rocking a phenomenal performance with this kind of finely tuned balance of like Faustian seduction and cosmic horror, especially that one moment where he was talking to Parker and then he noticed Parker getting, you know, distracted, overwhelmed, and then everybody just froze. And it's not like they froze in time. Like they went like just full on, they had no life in their eyes anymore. And that was freaky. I love that type of stuff. The way he kind of constantly switched up accents and outfits to try to best appeal to the person in front of him is just a super great Mephisto vibe. I didn't realize how relieved I was that Mephisto wasn't just gonna be like an old white guy in a suit type of like oil baron type of portrayal, but I'm so glad they went with a more kind of subdued, evil, pulls you in with seduction until you realize that you're in a fly trap. All right, now it's time to take a look at. Man, I'm coming out strong here, but what this show has to say about AI and how AI is integrated into this story. You know, Natalie, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about my thoughts on Natalie soon, but what I really have problems with is how absolutely tone deaf the AI recreation of my dead sister thing is handled. You know, her brother's initial reaction, or Nat's brother's original reaction to seeing, you know, the ghost of his sister is on the money. He is appalled, disgusted, betrayed, and just completely flees the scene in anger. But not literally. An episode later, he is essentially steamrolled both himself and by others to just accept that this thing exists, and he has no say in the matter. Riri definitely should have been more against this recreation of Natalie from the start. I understand why she was pulled this way. She's not here to make the best decisions. But just seeing her form this, like, I'm going to be honest, like this kind of disgusting parasocial relationship with what is essentially a generative model of AI, it just feels like the wrong message to be saying in this, like in the present today with the rise of generative models and how it's almost like condoning the act of like, oh, if you miss someone in real life, just talk to an AI bot and they can replicate them for you and you never have to lose anyone. Like that's not okay. I'm not cool with that. Some of the dialogue in episodes 1 to 3, the first batch, did feel a little off. I really got the vibe of Steve Buscemi in the "How do you do, fellow children" type of way. Also a fair bit of two-dimensional conversations written in the name of exposition. But that's pretty much unavoidable with any Marvel property nowadays. Riri's mom and her kind of like, and her family support structure, they really did get the short end of the stick on the writing. They kind of got a lot of the two-dimensional treatment. I really wished we could have foregone some of the more plot-driven aspects and spent a little more time there developing the relationship between Riri and her mom, because it just felt very like Hallmark ABC Family type of stuff. So yeah, a fair bit of the early shots of the Ironheart suit. I'm talking the one she gets from the MIT lab and the one she builds out of the more derelict car look very wonky, because it still to this day look pretty wonky. Very kind of like quickly composited, like there's kind of just sticking on the screen with a little bit of Elmer's glue. And yeah, while I ended up, and we're going to kind of tie this back to Natalie, while I ended up liking the kind of role, you know, of Natalie in Riri's decision-making and life by the end of the story, she was really annoying in the way she was written, just constantly omnipresent, and just felt like they really could have toned it down, made it a little more nuanced. And just like her sentience as an AI felt very like kind of rushedly explained in a way. Like they didn't devote a lot of time. Maybe I just missed something. They didn't devote a lot of time to it. And it almost makes me wonder if originally Mephisto was supposed to be behind her kind of advancedness to kind of plump Riri's desire up to realize that she does still need this relationship in her life. But that possibly ended up on the cutting room floor, just didn't exist at all. Last up, it's time for... Really, this is the only thing in the so-so. The magic versus technology aspect, I feel like it's a little lost in the plot. They seem to like really like pitting the two up together in at least the promotional material, but I didn't really catch a lot of like the exploration of the conflict or the comparison in the show, apart from, you know, the thematic level of, you know, magic in this show representing the shortcut, the easy way, but the way that'll get you hurt, while tech is more slow work, make sure we're good, you know, make sure we're on the right path and it'll work. But that also kind of gets lost in the plot too, and it just kind of makes me question what the actual intention of this like conflict comparison truly is. But yeah, it just felt very surface level. All right, it's time for the verdict. All in all, I did really enjoy my time with this series. Its isolation from the other running narratives in the MCU does really give it the spotlight it needs to tell the story it wanted to tell, although it was a little bit messier than they probably intended it to be, though. Far from the worst Marvel TV project we've gotten, and I'm really hoping for a season 2 because, well, the story's not over, and I would really like to see it concluded. I do feel it would be a little... I don't know. I feel like the story is too, at least personally, interesting to me that I wouldn't want to see it concluded in like a Champions or a Young Avengers type thing, or just an Avengers movie. It just, I really do want her to get smacked with the ramifications of her decisions, especially in making a deal with the devil. I mean, that's crazy. But yeah, all in all, I'm going to give it 3 irons out of 5 hearts. Tell us, or tell me why I'm wrong in the comments, and maybe I'll ignore it. Have a great weekend.